Melee Chronomancer is back, and better than it was long time ago in 0.1, so let's begin. Core items of this build are 2 Hammers of Faith, which grant random shrine buff for 20 seconds every 10 seconds. With base values, it's barely worth it. At best, you will have 4 different buffs, which is not bad, but not worth over good rare maces which get more damage, speed, and skill levels. But there's one way to scale it, make it expire slower, with 2 possible ways to do it. Get modifiers to slower expire rate of buffs, and self-inflicted temporal chains that grant slower expire rate to any effects on you. Whole Tree has 2 passives that give 10% slower expire rate each, and that's why Chronomancer is overall best choice, because Chronomancer has 2 small passives that grant 10% slower expire rate. So that's 40% in total, but still need more. Then we have Temporal Chains, which grant 25% slower expire rate of any effects, which doesn't scale with level of temporal chains, but does scale with curse magnitude. In this build, we reach 45% slower expire rate, which is added to slower expire rate of buffs from passives on tree. But unfortunately, slower expire rate is capped at 75%, so this build reached 75% with temporal chains, 2 ascendancy passives, and 1 tree passive. At 75% slower expire rate, any buffs last 4 times longer, so shrine buffs from maces became 80 seconds long, which is a lot. If slower expire rate didn't have cap, this build could reach 100% slower expire rate with some changes making any temporary buffs permanent, like shrines, charms, or any buffs from skills or supports. So that's how we get 2 shrine buffs every 10 seconds for 80 seconds. But note that Mace doesn't care what shrines you currently have. It will give random shrine, including ones you already have. So sometimes you might not see shrine buff you need for a while, if you unlucky. Another downside of this mace is when you swap, all shrine buffs disappear. So weapon swapping is no option in this build. But you have to somehow inflict temporal chains and keep it on self. And to do that, we use Cosprey's Will body armor that make curses have infinite duration. So we only need to cast temporal chains once per area, which is ideal. And to inflict temporal chains on self, we use newly added support, at Ziri's Allure, which simply reflect curses you inflict back to you, but has less curse effect, which is not a problem because we reach slower expire rate cap anyway. Last part is how to counter slow effect from temporal chains without reducing its effect, so we keep slower expire rate effect. And solution is Wanderlust Boots, which simply makes us ignore slows, so temporal chains doesn't slow us, but still keep full effect of slower expire rate it provide. So that's the concept of this build. Now let's start with gear. So we use 2 Hammers of Faith, ideally with 3 sockets, so we can place 5 runes for skill speed and 1 rune for extra chaos damage. Then we use Cosprey's Will, ideally 3 sockets, or increased evasion and energy shield corrupted enchant, which is a bit better than Greater Iron Rune. At higher budget, you can get both with double corrupt. Wanderlust, ideally with resist corrupt. At higher budget, double corrupt with resist and 2 sockets. Architect orbs are cheap, so it's not hard to get. Using movement speed rune and resist runes if you need. Now why I get energy shield instead of life if I stack strength for Giant's Blood passive and even use Astramentus. And reason is simple. Giant's Blood halves amount of life we get from strength, so scaling life will be hard, especially with body armor that has evasion and energy shield. But there's solution. Black Scythe training keystone passives provided by Heroic Tragedy Jewel, Varana version, which grant 1% energy shield per 2 strength, providing around 200% increased energy shield, which is huge amount. So that's the reason we use Astramentus. Besides giving a bit over 50% increased energy shield, it fixes all attribute requirements because we need over 100 intelligence and 67 dexterity for armor and almost 350 strength. Helmet simply with high energy shield and elemental resists. Gloves I have aren't ideal. I would rather have high energy shield than flat damage. Rare ring with high resists, some rarity and life. If you don't have leech on ring, get it on gloves instead. Using soul tether for energy shield leech, but normally it has mod that cause you to lose 5% energy shield per second, and to remove it you have to use Vol cultivation orb with chance of replacing that mod with one of few possible outcomes, most of which work fine for this build. So let's try. And second ring is Black Flame, which is temporary option I currently run with while I test different skill combinations. This ring causes enemies to take your ignite damage as chaos rather than fire. You still scale it normally with fire damage, and it still does fire damage, but enemy takes it as chaos. Reason I'm using it is free Withering Presence aura from Cospre's Will that also grant infinite duration to Withered effect. Withered can stack up to 10 times. Each stack cause enemy to take 5% increased chaos damage per stack, or up to 50% at 10 stacks, which is kinda like 50% more chaos damage. And since we use Perfect Strike, it does fairly good ignite damage even with minimal investment on tree. Charms against freeze and bleeding. Blood of the Warrior to maintain rage if no targets around. Mana Flask isn't needed since we use blood magic, so it just sit there. Obviously we're using Mace Strike. It's not Mace build without Mace Strike. With some attack speed, leech, and damage. It's good for clearing smaller packs or when you need to hit something fast. I have Time Freeze, but so far I had no need to use it. Withering Presence is from body armor, so it takes no spirit. Now important thing, Temporal Chains. It must have quality, and it must have heightened curse support with that Ziri's Allure supports. Also, didn't mention in gear part, you have to get any focus with curse magnitude that you can either buy or get from Abyss mod. And here in skill menu, you can see exactly how much slower expire rate you get from it. In my case, it's exactly 45%, so together with 30% from tree, I reach cap of 75%. For now, I'm using Sunder as second clearing skill. Feels better than anything I have tried so far, like Molten Blast, Stampede, or Bone Shatter. And to make Sunder feel good, we use all attack speed supports available, plus AoE and Super Critical. Reason to use Super Critical is Crit Shrine that guarantee that all hits are critical strikes. On low budget, use Fire Attunement or one of other damage supports instead of Rigwald's Ferocity. Perfect Strike used for single target, with damage supports and attack speed support. On low budget, use Fire Attunement or Super Critical supports instead of Zoph's Pyre. Hammer of the Gods is another skill for single target, used with best available damage supports, plus Zerfi's Infamy, which is extremely good support for this skill. Normally you can use Hammer of the Gods once you heavy stun boss to get glory, which takes a while unless you invest into stun buildup. But with this support, you simply spend life on other skills and get glory much easier and faster, allowing you to cast it more often. Plus it provides crazy 50% more damage and 50% increased AoE. Sniper's Mark used for few reasons. On its own it provides critical damage bonus. With Mark of Siphoning we get more leech. Charged Mark is extremely strong. It literally just drops shocked ground giving you 20% more damage. Mark for death support to break armor, and Eternal Mark to make it last some extra time. Infernal Cry that simply grant extra fire damage, with Raging Cry. And 3 spirit skills, Herald of Ash for clearing, Overwhelming Presence to stun and ignite faster, and War Banner for another big damage and attack speed boost. Use Duresso's Passion to lower its glory cost and AoE with skill duration supports. And finally Tree. It might look weird, but so far it's most optimized tree I could make. If I manage to make it even better, check guide page. It will always have most up-to-date info. At start, it's just Energy Shield passives and Heroic Tragedy Jewel to get Black Scythe training passive for massive Energy Shield boost. Also, all Weapon Set 2 passives spent on Curse Magnitude passives for Temporal Chains. Then more Energy Shield and super important passive that provide 10% slower expire rate for buffs. Then traveling to Warrior area where we take AoE, damage, more AoE, more damage, even more AoE, even more damage, damage, AoE, damage. Then Giant's Blood passive, and very important Fast Metabolism passive, which prevent leech to be removed when you full life. And for Ascendancy, most important thing is having those 2 small passives that give 10% slower expire rate of buffs each. Apex of the Moment is most useful option for this build. Now and Again passive can sometimes proc when you use Warcry, Mark, or Hammer of the Gods. I'm not sure if Time Freeze even needed, so maybe it's better to pick this small passive for 8% AoE. And that's the build. Aside of couple expensive supports I used, it's fairly cheap, especially in current economy. Also on guide page you can find recommendations on how to save currency when making this build, and how I crafted some of items. Now it's time for showcase.
呀红彤彤哎，心中的太阳是毛泽东哎，他领导我们的解放哎，人民翻身当家做主人。咿呀咿自由呀呀自由啊，人民翻身当家做主人。咿呀咿自由呀呀自由啊，人民翻身当家做主人。天上太阳红呀红彤彤哎，心中的太阳是毛泽东哎，他领导我们的解放哎，人民翻身当家做主人。咿呀咿自由呀自由啊，人民翻身当家做天上太阳红呀红彤彤哎，心中的太阳是毛泽东哎，他领导我们的解放哎，人民翻身当家做主人。咿呀咿自由呀呀自由啊，人民翻身当家做主人。 做主人。